Okay, moving on to our next tutorial. Just going to show you how you might log on. I know I've kind of started off where I've left off on the previous tutorials, but obviously if you've logged off and want to log back on again, you'll notice there on my desktop I have a shortcut to that particular website. If I've logged off, it'll ask me to log in, and in this case you want to use your login details, as I said before, that you use, I suppose, when you're logging on to any DIT system, or I suppose email would be one you use continuously on a daily basis. So click next in that regard. There's my, I suppose, my own staff password, but the password you obviously use. And you can click stay signed in if need be, and that would obviously make it a little bit easier for you. So we come straight to the project list here. I've got a number of projects. You'll probably only have one, given the one that you've actually set up, or maybe you have two. So I'm going to click on the one we've been working on. In this case, it's MC2, Measurement Constant 2, Semester 1 tutorial. I'm going to click that, and then I'm into this particular project. Now, I think when it opens, not now, whatever reason that's coming up, I think when it opens, you kind of defaulted into the Docs app, which comes with the Takeoff app that we've been working through. So just drop down that there and click Takeoff. So now I'm back into my Takeoff. You'll get this home screen up here. We've gone through the classification, adding the 2D drawings, and then creating a Takeoff package. So let's look at the Takeoff package we created. So you can click on Takeoff package here, or you can click here, over here on the right hand side for package. So click the Takeoff package. And I think we've only one package here, and this is just, what does a package really mean? It's just a group of Takeoff items that I'm kind of grouping into one package. I could create a number of different packages, maybe architectural, structural, or I could base my packages maybe on the different elements of a building, external walls, internal walls, whatnot. So it's just a grouping of Takeoffs. Now you can create, just one Takeoff package, and all your Takeoff goes into that. It means that you can export and import in different Takeoff packages from different buildings that you might have worked on in the past. So I'm just going to click architecture, because that's the one I've been working in. And up comes the drawings associated with that Takeoff package, which is here. And I'll click maybe my ground floor plan, because that's pretty much most of my Takeoff resides in that ground floor plan. So there it is there, zooming in and zooming out. And I want to see what Takeoff I've done in that ground floor plan, and there's all the Takeoff, most of that we've done over the last couple of weeks. Now, again, as I said before, turning off or turning on with the eye here helps kind of hiding information or hiding Takeoff, and that's handy to do as you continue your Takeoff, because it's quite hard to do Takeoff when all those Takeoff items are on view. Okay, so the little eye hides a group, or you can individually hide the actual Takeoff. So we're going to move now to external walls. What do we got in terms of an external wall? Well, it looks like we've got a cavity wall. Now remember, external walls are, from a kind of quantity surveying perspective, are all those walls above the ground floor. Rising walls are measured, as you can see here, and we've done it before in the previous tutorial, are measured in the substructure. So everything below ground floor level, so that DPC level, or the top of your ground floor, is essentially in the substructure, and that is everything, including walls, the floor itself, the build-up of that floor, hardcore, blinding, insulation, the concrete itself, and excavation, trenches, everything that goes with, I suppose, creating that substructure, creating that foundation and ground floor. External walls then builds up from the rising walls that you've already measured, and it goes right up, obviously, to the other side of the roof. External walls are those walls that are the external enclosure of the building, not the internal walls. They're designated as different wall types, or I suppose a different elemental category or work breakdown structure in your bill of quantities. Now remember, again, just to reiterate what I've said before, these are just Takeoffs. They are not, to differentiate between, let's say, a bill of quantities item, they're not bill of quantities items. We may use a number of these Takeoff items in a bill of quantities item. Okay, so for example, we could do our calculations based on floor, which is what we're doing at the moment, and then we'd have to maybe add a few different floor items, external wall quantities, for example, into our overall, I suppose, total quantity for external 100mm block work. Okay, so we have to measure per individual floors. We've got to add them in individually into that one takeoff item. So I'm showing you some good, I suppose, good best practice ways of doing takeoff, but it's not really, we're not, at least for this tutorial or these tutorials, we're not necessarily showing you how that's used in your bill of quantities. But you can imagine if you've got a bill in a workbook or an Excel and you've exported these takeoff items, it's pretty easy to use them once you've taken them off. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at our sheets and models. This is just to get a feel for what the section elevation might look like. So in the section, it gives us an idea, I suppose, if we cut through this building, what it would look like, and we can get a good idea of the profile of it. So you need to obviously look at all the sections and details and elevations in conjunction with your floor plans. I suppose this is one thing that's a disadvantage of 2D quantity takeoff, as well as the time it takes, as opposed to maybe 3D, which gives you a visual representation of actually how that building looks in an isometric view, whether this is, you kind of almost have to build it in your head. So what we have here is, this is obviously our ground floor level. Everything above that ground floor level is external walls, right the way up to the underside of the ceiling, right? So right the way up to the underside of this wall plate at eaves level. What we generally do is, as I said before, we measure them per floor. So I'm going to measure, I suppose, the height from here, my ground floor, up to the first floor level. And I can see that based on this level here, it's 2700 above the ground floor, which is 0. So I could do a little measurement there, quick measurement, if I wanted it. I'll come up to this level here, is what it's saying. Ooh. Not shown, and come down here, and you can see that, yeah, it's about 2000 or 2.7 meters. So click escape and that's gone as well. This is slightly different over here in the lean-to, because what's happening here is this is actually dropping down, and it's a little bit under, it's at this level really, I suppose, from there to there. So the height of what's at the back there in terms of the kitchen and I'll show you in a second on the plan, is slightly less. Now, for the moment, I'm not going to worry about it. We could get into the intricacies of doing that. You can see that that is 2.3 or 2.4 high, as opposed to 2.7 to here. Okay, but given the fact that this is a lean-to, this little bit of a section here on either side, you can see it in maybe the elevation. If I scroll down, front elevation, is there side elevation? Yeah, if I click side elevation, you'll see what I'm talking about here. So this little bit at the side here, so if I measured my walls up to the underside of the eaves there, I'd have to kind of include both sides there by measuring a little bit of a triangle. Now, I'm not going to worry about that for the moment, and we'll get into that maybe in a little bit later detail somewhere down the line. But I suppose if, going back to my section, if I measure it up to this level here, it'll take account for the bit above and the little bit of low on either side. Okay, so let's just measure the ground floor height, as I said there, as 2.7. So from the ground floor level to this first floor level. And then we'll measure from first floor level up to the underside of the wall plate level on the next floor. Okay, so let's get started on that. I just want to develop your proficiencies with takeoff or on-screen takeoff, and that's the most important thing for this tutorial, rather than the little bits and pieces that possibly need to go into the takeoff. We can deal with that when we actually look at the takeoff in conjunction with a bill of quantities item, and if anything's missing, we can add that in at that time. So of course, as I said before, we don't measure off sections, we don't measure off elevations, we don't measure off details, or at least we try not to. We measure off plans. We measure everything off plans. Maybe if there's a window area we're looking for in a cost plan, possibly we can measure off the elevations. But as I said before, the elevations don't give a true reflection of, I suppose, what you're looking at from a kind of a building point of view, because you might have things hidden in the elevation, in that surface area, that elevation, in terms of projections and recesses, that you can only really see on a plan. So let's click the ground floor plan again. There it is. Let's click the takeoff types. And as you can see, I've hidden all my takeoff for the moment, or at least all the takeoff on the ground floor. And let's add a couple of, well, let's start with what we see here as a brick facade. So as I said before, it's an external cavity wall, full fill with insulation. Looks like that's 100 block. How do I know that? Because that's the symbol for block work on a drawing, if you don't know that. We've got a hatch, and you see block work on either side, and then you got this insulation in the middle. You could look at the section again, and that's what you'd see. We looked at that in the rising wall, so you should know that that's the case. And then we've got this brick facade just to the, I suppose, to the front of the building. Now, when I say to the front of the building, it's in this part here, from here to here, and not in this recess here. So let's measure, well, the easiest thing, I suppose, is let's measure that brick. Now, let's just double check the height. So we're getting the right height here. Sheets and models, scroll down, front elevation. And I believe, well, it's not the scale. Do I have a scale there I can measure off? 7894. Let's put the scale here. One of the dimensions we know, it's the only dimension on the drawing, so let's do that. Click, and then zoom out and go to the very top and click again. Oh, let's make a mental note of that. 7894. Go to what's at the top here, right bang on, as accurate as I can. Click, and what did we say? 7894. I'm basically calibrating this drawing. So that's calibrated now, and I just want to make sure that this height is, I suppose, we measured this little bit actually as part of the rising wall, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's do a little measure from, let's say, here, because it mightn't necessarily be 2.7. So happy days, it is the 2.7. It is the height up to, you can see that there, well, it's near enough, up to where I had shown you on the section. So if we go back to the section again, section elevation, you can see that, in fact, there's the brick facade shown on that section. So it goes right up to this 2.7 level here. Okay, so that's the height of my brickwork. So let's go back. Well, in fact, we need to click on the ground floor plan. There we are. Let's go back to our takeoff. And let's add, right here on the right hand side, create takeoff type. Let's add, well, let's call it external walls. Just give it a kind of category as such. 100 millimeter brick outer leaf. So that's just, again, it's not a BOQ item. It's essentially a takeoff item that I will use maybe in that bill of quantities description that represents 100 millimeter brick outer leaf. I'm going to measure it as a length, okay, and it's going to go in default as that color. That's fine. What's my output? Well, again, superstructure, 2.1 external walls, and I'm looking for square meters area. So you're kind of getting this now. You've had a little bit of practice with the rising walls in terms of measuring walls, but generally we'll measure them as a length. We'll define what's called a height, or a default height in this case, and we'll put it in there, 2.7, and it's meters. Now, of course, if I wanted to change it to millimeters and put it in as 2,700 millimeters, that's fine too. So I think I'm happy enough with that. Once I start takeoff, I click that, and in I go there, and you can see that it's gone in as an external wall item, and there's my description, and now I can actually do the quantity takeoff. Now I'm going to show you a slightly different way. I'm going to measure along the lines of my walls. Now I could, as I've shown you before, measure through the center line, but let's just take a corner. It could be the inside or outside. So let's take it from there. Now what I don't like about this product is the fact that they have, and they told me they're going to change it, in fact, these very thick lines. I really just want to represent that line, and now it gives me this huge thick line that almost goes outside my boundary, which is really not the case. You can see that this little point here, and then the circle kind of extends beyond that, which you think that maybe that's what it's representing, but it's not. It's point to point. So from the first point along this external line to the next point. Now I got this little extension here, as you know before. How do I get rid of that? Well, I can continue on using that to form a continuous line, or I can just click enter, and that's now a representation of my line times my height, giving me my external, I suppose, brickwork. And that's what I'm looking for on my ground floor, because I'm measuring on my ground floor. So let's add another item here. This time it's going to be create external walls. Let's keep it the same kind of format. 100 millimeter block work. Okay, I could divide it into inner leaf, outer leaf, but let's just lump them all together because it doesn't really matter. It's still a part of the external wall, whether it's an internal leaf. Now, students do make that mistake sometimes. They measure an internal leaf of an external wall as an external wall, but in fact it's not. Or sorry, as an internal wall. In fact, it's not. It's still the external wall because it's the composite item as such. So external walls, 100mm block work. I can give it a purple. That's fine. It's measured as a length. All the same thing again. This is block work now. 100 block work on edge. 2.1 external walls, and it's not a count, it's going to be square meters, and again the exact same. I'm going right up to my first floor level, which I showed you before is 2.7 meters high, and then I'll start takeoff. Okay, so once I click that, I'm back in again. Now I'll keep that that dimension shown, what I measured before, because it gives me an idea of what I've measured. Now, just to kind of give you, I'm going to show you something different. You could do it this way, whereby you go through the center line and measure it all as a kind of continuous line on the external and do the same for the internal. But I'm going to go and show you what I think is good practice, this kind of outside to inside scenario when I'm measuring walls. And I like to measure walls along the face, even though obviously the wall isn't necessarily represented as a face. It's represented as actually the wall itself in terms of its length, which would be through the center line. And if you want to measure it that way, that's fine. But if I want to measure this wall and measure them as kind of individual items, let's start with, well, I suppose here. So what's happening is I've essentially measured this brickwork to the outer edge, and that encompasses obviously the entire brick. So if I'm starting this wall, let's start on the inside. Now I can start on the outside, but it'll obviously be different as I go around. But if I start that as the inside, okay, and I keep it on the inside line, and I come up to where that kind of inside line finishes here, and then I've got this particular line, and I click enter. Now I've measured that as one item, but I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to kind of swap now because that wall is represented right up to the edge here, and I'm not going to start here because then I'll be double measuring that corner. Does that make sense? So obviously if I measure up to this edge for this wall, I won't start here because, as I said, I'll be double measuring. So I'll go from outside or inside to, what I say, outside, and go from there to there and click enter. So that's my next wall as such. Now, as I said, this is a little bit confusing because they've got such thick lines here that kind of, you think that I'm measuring into the, I suppose, this point here, but that's not the case. You're measuring along the line. So now I'm going from outside, in this case, to inside. And there we go, all the way up. And I know I'm on the inside here. And stop there. Click enter. Now I'm going from outside all the way across to the outside here. Click enter. And then starting with the inside. So it's just another way of doing it, I suppose. And I'm down to, I suppose, where this stops here because this outer leaf is brickwork right here. So I'm on the inside. Click enter. Okay, so there we are. Now I didn't measure it as a continuous line because I was kind of going outside inside or inside outside depending on where I'm going, and you can see that that's 81.27, but I've also got the internal leaf. So let's go with that and maybe go the same kind of scenario here. Start with this here, so starting here, and I'll go up to I suppose right to the edge, right to the end. Click enter. Go then inside corner, and you know the reason why I'm doing this, to this corner here. Ooh, I want to get the right point. Okay, there we go. Click enter. Now you got to click enter as you go around because you're forming individual lines rather than forming a continuous line. So if you clicked again, you'd be kind of forming a continuous line. Now remember, you can go backspace. So I'm going on the inside face here first. Click, and then enter. And then I'm going outside on my internal leaf. There we go. And I'm on the right line. Go to here. Oh, see, I made a mistake there. If I go backspace. There we go. Enter. And then on the inside, clicking. So I'm kind of working my way around this internal leaf. Back down to, say, here. I'd have to zoom in to get the exact item, and then I think this is my last one. So from here, I'm not going to start here because then I'll be missing the corner as such. So I start over here, that gets that item, and I'm moving across. Now remember, like, this is proficiency. Proficiency develops with time. If you're not quite getting it just yet, or you're not being as quick as I am, don't worry about it. Be as slow as you need to be. Look at this video as many times as you need to look at it, and you'll develop your proficiency over, let's say, weeks, if not months and years. So click enter. So what have I got going on there? I have 175.79 as my total external block, 100 millimeters, and I've got both sides there of my cavity, my outer leaf and my inner leaf, and then I got this brickwork here at 17.59. So let's maybe take a look at what I measured from a kind of a detailed point of view. So hopefully you've got in around that. If I want to see that, click the three dots, click the detail takeoff, and now instead of one long item, which I might have if I was measured as a continuous line through the center line, I got a number of different items here. And you can see as I click on them, they kind of highlight where they are here in the drawing. Okay, and if I need to right click, or if I need to delete that, I can click it and press delete on my keyboard if I made a mistake and I want to do it again. But that's kind of a good way of seeing exactly how that 175.79 is broken up. And most softwares have that, or online or on-screen takeoff softwares have that. And I can go back here, or I can just click back there. Okay, so I'm back into my 175. And obviously that 175 is made up of all those individual items, and then I've got my external walls. All right. So we're going to move on now. That is my external walls on my ground floor. And in fact, I actually should have articulated it that way, because it would make it easier to see. So maybe I'll go and change that actually. So click the little edit, little pencil here, and let's say external GF walls, ground floor walls. Let's just change it to that. Okay, save. It doesn't do anything. It's just changing the name, and that's fine. And let's do the same here. So external GF. So I know which is which. I mean, obviously I'll know when I actually click the takeoff, but it just gives me that little bit of differentiation. Okay, moving on from that to, I suppose, what will be my first floor. I've got to go ahead and click on the first floor. But before that, let's take a look at what height I need to apply to the walls on the first floor. So let's look at my section. Now I've got the section elevation. I believe I've also got a wall section down here, which could probably give me some heights. It kind of does and doesn't, because it depends on where it's through, and it'll give me a height. It's through the wrong section as such. Now it does give me ceiling heights, but I think it's not really that useful for let's say wall heights. So I'll stick to my section elevation. I have that scaled anyway. You can see that the calibration came out as 1:78. Remember, and I said this before, that these calibrations won't always be nice and uniform, 1:100, 1:200, as in they won't be scaled, because you do have an option to change that there. But we scaled it or calibrated it on a known dimension, and that's the best way to do it. So as I said before, we've measured the rising walls, we've measured the little cavity above this stacked wall as part of the substructure, and then we measured from ground floor level up to 2,700, and now we're going to go from 2,700 up to 5,118. Now I'm going to be a little bit conservative here. Even though that wall stops and looks like it stops underneath the wall plate, so it's not quite the difference between 5,118 and 2,700. It's a little bit less than that. I'm going to measure it as that because it'll kind of, I suppose, give me a little bit of continuity. Now, it's not the most accurate, but again, I suppose I want to keep on maybe the high side as opposed to the low side. So I can see there that height, in fact, is, well, what would be the difference between 2,700 and 5,118, which essentially is a dimension that's shown here, 2,418. So I'm going to measure that, even though it doesn't quite go to the ceiling height, it goes to just underneath the wall plate level there. But I'm going to err on the high side, and there really isn't a whole lot of difference. So let's take the 2.418. Now again, if you did a little measure distance from, let's say, there to there, which is where we ended, 2357. There's not a whole lot of difference between 2357. In fact, you could average it at 2.4 if you wanted it, but I'm going to take the 2418. So that's my external walls, and you'll notice if you looked at the elevations, it's all blockwork as such. So the front elevation has a brickwork, and then the upper elevations as well as the other sides are the blockwork cavity wall with a render. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click back on my first floor because this is what I'm measuring. You'll notice the first floor is different. It doesn't go through the footprint of what's in the kitchen below. It kind of goes over here, and there's a beam across here. You can see that in the section. So the section cut through there shows you that actually the external wall continues on above that kitchen area and forms this kind of lean-to roof. So we're going to be measuring along this line now at, what did I say, 2.418. So let's click back on our dimensions. You can click off these partitions and this first floor, okay, to hide what's already measured on the first floor. And let's go ahead, scroll down here, and put in some measurements like this. We don't have blockwork, so the only real thing here we've got is, sorry, we don't have brickwork. The only thing we've got here from an external walls point of view, and I'll get to the insulation in a second, what we call forming cavities, is blockwork on outer leaf, blockwork and inner leaf. Okay, so it doesn't really matter from, at least from a bill of quantities point of view, whether it's inner leaf or outer leaf. It's all lumped into the measurement of 100mm blockwork in your BOQ, and you've probably been doing that from an external walls perspective. You've probably been doing that with FICRA. So just take it from me. Whether it's inner leaf or outer leaf. Now I could measure them separately as inner leaf, and I could measure them separately as outer leaf, but I'd be combining them in my BOQ, so why not just keep them together? Okay, so same thing again, plus create takeoff, same thing again, let's call them external walls, external FF walls, first floor, and give the little dash, and 100mm block work. Okay, so there's no difference here. I'm just naming something different. There's no difference in how we measure it. So again, it's a lineal measurement because I'm measuring it off the plans. I can't measure a wall area off a plan, can I? So I have to measure a length and define a default height. So superstructure again, external walls as a square meters length. Scroll down and we put in that, what did I say, 2.418. And I'm ready then to start my takeoff. Okay, now I can save it and then click on the takeoff and go ahead and start it, but I can go directly to start takeoff. There it is. There's my little crosshair, so I know I'm in takeoff mode. If I have to move to selection mode, my crosshair is gone. So I go back to takeoff mode and I'm back in it. Make sure I'm on the right item. Click and I'm back in takeoff mode. Okay, so this one is fairly straightforward. We could measure it as a center line if you wanted it. In fact, I might do it two ways just to show you. I might do the external leaf as a center line as such, and the internal leaf as the kind of outside inside. But you wouldn't normally do it. You'd kind of follow one way. So what would be the kind of center line between that 2 points starting here? It would be kind of right here. Okay, so I think that is kind of center. I suppose the outside inside might be the most accurate way because you mightn't necessarily get exactly where you want here. So I might say here. Now I'm not going to hit enter because I'm going to do continuous line, so I'm just going to work my way around what I think is the kind of corner of this, and then work my way around. You'll notice I'm measuring through windows. That's something I'll take out at a later time. I'm not going to stop on either side of that window. Because then I'm saying that the window is full height, which is not. Oh, zoom in. There we go. And you might find that this is the easier way for you guys to measure this. It's up to yourself. I would say better practice is the outside inside, and then I want to come back on that actual point. So zoom right in, click, turns green. So you'll notice then if I went to the three dots, I clicked detail takeoff, I would just have one item, and that's the case. So as opposed to went inside outside, I'd have a number of different items. If you need to, click the little arrow here and move things in and out. You can see that here, if I scrolled up, it's a little bit lopsided. Maybe this needs to come up a little bit, or this one needs to come down a little bit, maybe, I don't know, just to be a little more accurate. There we go, and release. Doesn't really change that, or at least I don't think it did. 77.41 in terms of my area. So I'm going to click back on the actual takeoff, make sure I'm in the takeoff mode, this little linear line, and I'm going to do the internal leaf via the way I did previously. So starting from maybe the inside and keeping on the inside up through this wall. And there's the inside of that. Click enter to form one line, and then moving to what would be the outside of the leaf. Click enter, clicking on the inside and working my way around. So again, as I said before, you might have to look at these videos a few times and do this stuff a few times to really get the hang of it. But at least it's kind of getting you going. Backspace, because I made a little mistake. And I'm going over to this corner and clicking enter. And then I'm going to start at this corner. Click enter. All different lines, not continuous line like the last one was. And then back to where I started, and I'm going to come as far as here. And then enter. And you can see kind of what's happening there. I've measured this line, measured along the line, but it actually represented that wall, and that wall then stops there. So it's almost nearly as if I was constructing it, because I built it here, and then I take from this point here, and then build that direction. Now obviously the walls will be stacked on top of each other. Every second brick would be kind of intertwined as such, so it wouldn't be as simple as that, but it kind of represents exactly what I want. So hopefully I've got everything measured there. 15104 is my total external 100mm block, both inner leaf and outer leaf on my first floor. So if I wanted to see the 3 dots, detailed takeoff, you can see that I've got this quite large linear takeoff, which is the continuous outside line, and then I've got these individual items which I measured for the inner wall. So you can do it the way I've done it there, or you can just measure whatever way I want. If you wanted to click on one item, hover over it, and you can drag and drop it whatever way you want to kind of, I suppose, manipulate it if you made a mistake. All right, but I'm happy enough with that, and I think that pretty much is my external wall. So actually, there's an item here which I alluded to, which I forgot the measurement, so that's not complete as such. And plus there's quite a few other items related to closing cavities, lintels, etc. that we're not measuring, but we may do that when we do some bill of quantities, or we look at the items in the bill of quantities and add them in then. And also I've been measuring through the walls here, so we'd obviously have to deduct out those wall opes, and window opes and door opes. And again, I can show you how to do that at a later time, but for the moment we're just concentrating on the pure forms of measurement. But something I need to measure here is the insulation. So I keep it on the first floor for the moment, because that's what I have open. And what I need to do is, again, it's external walls, and this time they believe it's 100mm full fill insulation. Now we can do this one pretty quick because it's the same as the other processes in relation to external walls. It's an external wall classification, meters squared, and the height, what did we say, 2.418. So that insulation is going to be the same height as the walls because it's in between those two leaves. So we'll start that takeoff. Actually, well, I can leave it as is, or what I should do is I should actually hide, and then I need to click back on little eyes at the full fill just to make sure. Yeah, click the little eye here and click the item so my little plus comes up, and then as I said, I turned off my other items there, so it makes it a little bit easier to measure. And this is my full fill wall insulation in between the two leaves, and maybe start one of the corners. And there we go again. We're going to measure this as a continuous line. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Click in the middle there, down again to the very end. This is in between, or sandwiched in between, as you know yourself from your construction technology. used to be that it would be about 60 millimeters wide or half the cavity, but now they've started filling the entire cavity with insulation. In fact, some contractors will be filling the cavity with insulation and maybe even dry lining the internal side of that external wall as well to meet the regulations. But in this case, it looks like it's just full fill and then back on the item. Okay, there we go. So 75.46. So do that for the first floor, and do it also, clicking back on my drawings, we're going to do it also for the ground floor plan. And the ground floor plan, if you can remember, was 2.7 high. Let's turn off, let me just cancel that. And let's turn off all the items there. So again, external walls. External GF walls. Let me just keep the same methodology. 100 millimeters full fill. Okay, insulation. Linear, that's the border. Same again. Superstructure, external walls, meter squared, and what did I say? 2.7 for the ground floor. And start takeoff. Because I've got them turned off, once I start the takeoff, I'm ready to go. And let's go ahead and do a quick measure on this. So starting with what I think is the center there, zooming out. Hopefully at this stage now you're kind of getting used to how you might zoom in and zoom out. In fact, you zoom out and then hover down. It's down here. Zoom in. Zoom out. Let me push down my little hand. Zoom in. Next corner. Zoom in. And then back to the start. Okay, there we go. And that one's 90.48 in terms of my meter squared measurement. Now, this one, which is my, if I just double click it, I should probably put in that that was an FF walls 100 meter full fill, so that I have a differentiation between what is ground floor and what is first floor, and I can see it there. So full fill insulation on the first floor, and then full fill insulation down here on the ground floor. Okay, if I want to see that quant on the first floor, I've got to click on the first floor drawing. But if I clicked on that, for example, that 90, where is it gone again? External walls. This 90.48, and just had a look at the detail takeoff, I can see, well, in fact, I shouldn't have that 0 there because that's actually just an error. I'm going to delete it. Doesn't make a change to the, I just double clicked on the little point up here to create that second dimension, but it's 96.48 meters squared, one continuous line. So if we go back, you can see it there, 96.48. So I'm happy enough. That's external walls now with both my block work and my insulation, and in fact one item of brickwork as well. Okay, so we'll pick up on this in the next tutorial, measure some more items next week. We'll stop this tutorial. Next week we'll pick up on something else, but we're working quite nicely through our drawings here in terms of takeoff for a fairly simple, I suppose, house, and you're getting a feel for the on-screen takeoff. But as I said before, the more you do it, the better you get, and we'll continue on. Okay, all the best.